I am so happy that you would take time out of your busy schedule to meet with me. It's really an honor.
My pleasure.
I thank you very, very much. And the reason I wanted to actually have this conversation is the last time that we spoke, I was listening to you, and it was a casual environment, and you were able to talk about the human mind. And I was extremely intrigued with what you were saying because it's so consistent with what we are teaching inmates, people who are incarcerated, people who make poor decisions. So my question to you is, what is your philosophy about the human mind? What do you think about when you think, here is a human mind? What do you think of?
Well, I think of a lot of things. I think of the fact that as human beings, we're all blessed with a miracle above all miracles. Everything that lives in my belief system is a miraculous result of something that I can't even explain in terms of how did it all happen. I mean, there's religious ways of explaining it, and I certainly have my religion. But I'm talking about something beyond religion. I'm talking about evidence. Things that live are evidence of something miraculous, whether it's a little ant or a huge sperm whale or a human being. So when I think of the human being, what makes the human being the most unique of all the living things is the human mind. And that mind, ironically, is challenged from birth to develop in a way that is going to be productive for the owner of the mind, but also can coexist with millions of other minds. And so there's this need to look at the human mind in terms of what its challenges are. And that's where we begin this discussion. What are the challenges?
Yeah, and you said the owner of the mind. One of the Gogi tools is boss of my brain. And that's very similar, that I'm the boss of my brain. Nobody else is the boss of my brain. And you say that we are born with an inherent ownership in our mind. It's the same thing. Talk to me a little bit more about this ownership, the opportunities and the obstacles in having that ownership.
Well, the ownership and the opportunity of the ownership is essentially the greatest challenge you'll have as a person. Generally there's several thresholds that the mind will experience continuously. And those thresholds need to be understood, and one has to kind of hurdle into those thresholds in order to better boss their mind or, in my case, manage the mind. So the question is, what are the thresholds? What are the challenges? What will get in the way of a self-fulfilling mind as opposed to just one that's reactionary? Now, the way I approach it is that the mind will be challenged with positive experiences and negative experiences. And the mind captures those experiences either intellectually or emotionally or both. And I suspect it's both, because I don't think we can cut out emotion from even rational thinking or objective thinking. But emotions will fit in a positive or negative way, as well as the interpretation of experiences that the mind will go through. They'll either be positive or negative or a combination of both. So the challenge of a human being is to sort it out in a way that is not self-destructive.
When an individual comes into this earth, they come in this environment that may be mother, maybe grandmother, maybe foster care, and their environment plays a part in them determining their emotion or their opinions about things. Ultimately, the owner of the mind has a responsibility. Let's talk for a moment about those who might have a disadvantage in their environment. What is their obligation in developing a mind that's going to be positive, that's going to react positively, have the positive emotions?
Well, I think that is one of the challenges. That's one of the hurdles that you've just described, that if your environment is essentially negative in a predictable way, then what has to happen is that you have to adjust how you use your mind in that environment and not allow the environment to control your mind more than you do. There's no question the negative things will influence the mind, but then it's up to the human being to grasp that this is not something that the human being that owns that mind chooses, that it was brought to them from conditions that that person has less control over. Children, for example, cannot choose their parents, and then when they come from dysfunctionality within the environment of the home, then you end up with a child who's going to have a lot of negative feelings that get stored in the brain in a way that changes the behavior of that child through basically a misunderstanding as to how to maneuver this. The children are not necessarily fully equipped to maneuver negativity.
Right.
So they will avoid negativity or they will engage in negativity as a norm. And so the normalness is one that a person has to decide, what do I want my normal to be? Do I want to let negative become my normal, or do I want to let positive be my normal?
And that choice, do I want negative to be my normal or positive to be my normal, is why I believe we have such a high recidivism rate, because that choice, that positive is my normal, is a very difficult one. Can you talk about how in the face of societal adversity, addiction, a long rap sheet, how can an individual still make a choice to have positive be their normal?
I think the linchpin to positive being the normal is, how do you want to associate trust as to a value that you as a person want to incorporate? In other words, if you're around negative things and you're reacting to them and you take on behavior that is joining in with some negativity, particularly as you interpret the negativity inside yourself. If you say life normal is negative, then you will become a negative person, and you will adopt those things that were brought to you as part of your normal, whether it's violence, drug addiction, insensitive communication, thoughtlessness, selfishness, things that are essentially not socially positive. Those things will engulf how you operate as a human being, but that doesn't mean you have to choose into it. You have to have that somewhat of a barrier in your mentality that says, I can tolerate a certain amount of negativity, but I will not make it who I am. And that's what one of the challenges are.
That is a challenge, and I know that you in your own life, you've been able to make those choices. Negativity coming at you, you can take so much, but you still make a certain choice. That's an art and that's a skill. And I believe that many people in prison, 2.3 million of them across the United States, don't have that skill set, don't have that ability. What they're thinking as they watch us is, well, yeah, but he had opportunity, or yeah, but he's not an addict, or yeah, but Coach Taylor has never XYZ. If I was a drug addict and you were talking to me and I say, well, yeah, but Sheriff, I have this addiction thing, what would you tell me concretely? What are some steps that I could do so that I can start making positive decisions?
Well, I think that's a very complicated answer that has to come forward. I think the question is probably the most difficult question to answer for everybody in one way. But I do believe that an individual can describe themselves as a full owner of who they want to be. All right? So the negative can be blocked out through some diversions. And I think that learning how to divert negativity is one of the highest challenges that people face today. Whether it's coming from the parents or the siblings or strangers or just the general nature of life, including the rough and tumble of the society that has its own biases and forms of bigotry and prejudices and like. In schools, kids are very competitive and they tend to get aggressive with their competitions. So those things are going to happen. So when you as a person are expecting that to happen, even though you desire that it not happen, then you will start to look for diversionary methods in order to not make that the sum total of who you are.
So some diversions for an addict might be, what would be a diversion for an addict? If I say, well, okay, I get this, that I'm the owner of my mind. I get that I'm an addict, it's a choice, I can start to choose different, I can choose diversions. What are some of the diversions that an addict might choose?
Well, in my opinion, I think there's many that one can choose. You know, I always like to tell people, if you really are depressed, and most people go through that, obviously, I think all people do, but you can choose music to occupy that depression. And when you get into some of the greater sounds that are positive sounds, that allows you to take a vacation from the threats to your well-being. And so you want to take a break for a period of time and then come back to whatever the challenge is and deal with it in a positive way. And sometimes that positive way is to try and not react at all and be patient. A lot of people who are reactors to challenges and depression and want to just, quite frankly, deal with it immediately will take drugs. But those who are willing to endure the feeling, believing that it'll go away in several days, have a better chance to stay addict-free. Now, I'm just using one example or two, but the nature of the human mind is that if you focus it on something positive, like reading, I think reading offers another form of diversion, including writing. And you could even write about the subject of feeling bad and have a better experience than one if you just allow it to revisit you constantly all day long. So there's a need to get in the way of that feeling.
Diversion is big for you. Disrupting the thought and diversionary tactics, it seems to me in this mind management that you have, that this is a very critical strategy, that you have a diversionary, something that you know diverts the thought, and that you are the manager of the mind. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe in that theory, but I also believe that in the world of negative versus positive, in my own experiences, I don't hang around negative people. There are those who continuously show that, and I just say, this is it. I'm not hanging out with this kind of person. Polite to them, always stay on your own best behavior, but you got to get away. And those that you coexist with that constantly pull you into drugs, pull you into thinking that this person over here is talking behind their back about you, someone that likes to deliver you bad news about you, which is, allegedly is your friend. You got to get away from that kind of person because they'll continually convince you that they know something about you that you don't know, and because they're telling you what is negative about you, because someone else said something negative about you, they become a controller of you. Not the negative, but the friend who's delivering the negative is using that negative in a way that influences your negative behavior.
Usurping your ability to manage your mind, to be the boss of it.
Right.
Ownership.
And so the key to the diversion process is to select your friends in a way that either they're positive, and if they're not, you don't need them as a friend.
Another question is, and I talk with a lot of incarcerated individuals who say, well, this is my family. This is all I know. Drug addiction or gangs, this is my world. This is who I am. And they almost perceive that anything other than that would be boring or impossible. What would you say to somebody who's grown up in a gang environment or grown up with drugs and they define themselves that way and they have an impossibility almost to see themselves any other way? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that their mind is overloaded with that experience and they don't see daylight. I think they're in a fog. They're in a fog of noise. It's a negative socialization that they're experiencing, and they see that as normal. But in order to learn another way, sometimes you do have to go to jail. I mean, even though others have similar reasons for being in jail, no two people in jail are the same. But I do think that most people, when they're separated from their social group that got them in jail, that they will be in another social group, perhaps in jail. And the whole purpose of education-based incarceration, which we're doing in Los Angeles County jails, is to disrupt this negative socialization with positive socialization. And that's why our merit program, and then the program you ran, that was GOGI program, and is an example of changing the socialization process from negative to positive.
Do you honestly believe that change is possible?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's no such thing as a person that's incapable of changing the way they manage their minds. They just have to learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm. You and I had talked before, and you said something very casually. You said, Coach Taylor, you and I are really social workers. Explain that. How do you perceive yourself as the sheriff of our county, as really socially engaged, a social worker? What does that mean to you?
Well, social work is a way of life. You see, every human being is a social worker, even if they don't ascribe to being a social worker. But in order to coexist in a family, you have to have social skills. And those social skills should be positive. And if I, as the head of a family, were to describe to someone else as the head of a family, the first order of business is to create a positive environment for everyone in the family. Well, then extended friends become like family. So the first order of business for the extended friendship modality is to be positive. You know, there's a lot of reasons people get negative, and we've touched on a few. But you don't have to make it worse. You see, and my theory of all this is to look at the miracles. Now, the other diversion that I think is critical is to look at all the miracles. Look at all the living things that are here. Look at the objectivity of why food has to exist. And look at the objectivity as to why the sun has to exist. If you pull the sun out, it's over with. If you pull water out, it's over with. If you pull food out, it's over with. If you pull out language, we can't even have negative or positive. Right. We're just surviving in an animalistic way. So we've been delivered many valuables to who we are that without we couldn't even exist. So the objective is to think long term when you're in the middle of a problem, and set a goal out there that says, I want to appreciate all of life so I can appreciate that I live. Therefore, I'll appreciate my life, that I'm a witness to imperfection, but I'm not a product of imperfection.
One of our last questions, in setting goals, if I'm sitting in a cell and I don't know if I'll ever get out, you've spoken before about the value of the human life regardless of where it's sleeping at night or regardless of where it's waking up in the morning. Talk to me a little bit about how no matter who you are or what your educational level, your life is important. And I think that's a very critical message that you share.
Well, see, I believe that all human beings can say, I'm going to set a goal for myself, all right? And I think the best goal that a human being that's got difficulties can set is says, I want to be a kind human being in spite of how I am feeling inside right now. In spite of the fact that I don't feel good inside and I've got a lot of negative vibes going inside of me. You can say, my goal is to be a kind human being. I'm not interested in violence. I'm not interested in vulgar behavior. I'm not interested in thoughtlessness. I want to be kind and thoughtful, and that's what I want to be noted for. Then you're taking it all the way to the top of the positive chain, and you're starting at the top. Now, all you have to do is say, that's what I want to do. You don't have to be paid to do it. You don't have to go to a college to do it. You don't have to study 1,000 books. You don't have to go to 5 therapists. All you're saying to yourself is, I want to be a thoughtful and kind human being in spite of all the things I've had to endure with people who are not kind and thoughtful to me. So I'm going to take the negative and I'm going to convert it into positive things out of me, and I'm not going to buy into the negative. And I think that's the greater, higher order of thinking that you'd be proud of as a human being.
And how do you get the mentality from believing that kindness is weakness to you and I both know kindness is the strength That is the highest value of us as humans, is to have that strength of being kind. How can we switch our mentality from kindness being a weakness to actually kindness being a very, very strong part of human character?
Well, I mentioned kindness as the ultimate top of the behavioral chain for human beings, but I also believe that thoughtfulness is the other part of kindness that is the strength. That if you're a blustering human being, I'm not saying you're a bad human being or a negative human being, but if you take up a lot of space in the world, if you're the noisy, thoughtless human being who is essentially without any consideration for others, and you're just going to have your way all the time, then you're going to be destined to some real serious falls in life, because that's not how human beings survive, is being self-centered and thoughtless and blustering and stealing and doing the things that are essentially selfish in nature. So the concept of strength is not selfishness, but yet we tend to blend impervious behavior as strength when it's not. Whereas thoughtful behavior is ultimate strength.
Right.
And all the things that we are taught in the theological world are not relative to bluster and thoughtless control and all the things that people who are fundamentally insecure get into because they're over-adjusting for a large sense of insecurity within themselves. Yes. It takes a secure person to be thoughtful. It takes a secure person to be kind. It takes a person who enjoys who they are and enjoys who others are.
Right.
And so because we're human beings and we're gifted with language, we are obligated to be thoughtful towards one another. This is not a mandate. It is a mandate. The creating of life for all life forms gave all life forms natural savagery, except the human being. The human being was given a mind that is not on the level of the animal, where it's survival of the fittest. And human beings should not function in a survival of the fittest mode in order to achieve strength as a human being.
Beautiful. You and I had spoken about the wallpaper in your mind. Like, what you choose to put in your mind is your choice, that you are decorating this mind with choices. Explain that, because I took away, when we had that conversation, I thought, wow, what a beautiful analogy, that my mind is this room that I get to decorate any way I want. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Right. Well, talking to the prisoners, I've said to them, some of you are more free than people who are actually out in the street. And I says, and the point I'm making is that if you don't create a palace in your mind, the world will be your prison. And so the nature of thoughtfulness is the first form of order, along with kindness. But thoughtfulness leads to kindness. Okay, kindness doesn't necessarily mean you're totally thoughtful, but thoughtfulness says kindness is an appropriate tool for me to express who I am, and I use thoughtfulness to identify those points of kindness. And you can be kind to an animal, you can be kind to a thought process, you can be kind to another human being. Even if you disagree, you can still be kind and thoughtful of a person. But we're in this technical era of Facebook and Twitter and other things, and we're slamming each other. Strangers are slamming each other. Someone says something that another person disagrees with. It's not a matter of a thoughtful response. It's calling a person an idiot.
Right.
We're basically degrading humanity. And others are in the pit watching this and enjoying it. They're cheering and saying, oh, yeah, this is great. That's how I feel. You guy's a fool. So we have these collisions that are going on. And human collision, human colliding might appear natural for the highest order of the life, but it's not. It's more animal type conflicts which are going on in who's the strongest of the species. And the truth is that we're not in a pyramid society where whoever is the most fit, like mixed martial arts, social mixed martial arts, that the guy that has the most dominant argument and the most dominant personality is going to end up at the top of the human chain. I don't think so. I think what's happening is that the majority of societies across religions and ethnicities and races, the majority of society is more thoughtful, more kind, more coexistent.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I'm so grateful. I know you're very busy, but this is a topic I think that is very, very important to you, and certainly it is my life's work to get this message of management of the mind out. Would there be any last thing that you would want incarcerated individuals to hear you say?
I say to incarcerated individuals, you already know what negative is. Build on the positive side of who you are. Balance the two. Eventually the negative will get smaller in its importance to you, and you will take on the idea that trusting yourself will allow you to trust others. Be your best friend. Allow that friendshipping that you're capable of to be done without negativeness, and look towards an idea that you're always in the youth of who you are, that life is miraculously long in its content, whether it's on here or if you believe in the heavens, which I happen to do, believe in, that you got to be on the long haul of developing who you are. Confucius says it takes 100 years to develop the human mind. Mm-hmm. So you're on the early stages. Best of luck.
Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.